The markets are in Q4 of 2025, and that should be the moment that we are all enjoying big profits and that we should be having a top of the market cycle. But none of this is true, and that's why this video is super important to watch, because we're going to look at that top signal. Is it flashing? Should we be getting out of the market? And should we be selling our altcoin portfolio? Let's get started. Before we continue with this episode, I'd like to ask you for a small favor, which is to subscribe to this YouTube channel, but also to subscribe to the podcast channel. The link is in the description beneath. And the reason why I'm asking it is because we would love to do offline podcast episodes. This week, we have been going to London to shoot 3 podcast episodes. We did one with Wintermute on the market crash. We did one with one of the founders of Multiverse X, previously known as Elrond, and we did one with one of the head of growth for the base chain. That is one of the biggest chains that's going to be launched at some point in time, or at least a token. And to be honest, I like the vibes of offline podcast episodes. We would love to continue to do so, but in order to do so, we need you. We need you to become a subscriber of the channel so we can grow and get the better podcast guests to continue building the entire channel. So a small favor to become a subscriber on that channel as well. So thank you very much if you become one of us. Now, today we're talking about the crypto top, which is the most common question on Twitter. It has been for a while, and I've been vocal for a while that I believe that the 4-year cycle is technically gone. And to be honest, we are in October, November of 2025, which should be the case where we are having all those big profits on altcoins. But none of it is true. We are still at all-time lows for most of the altcoins. Yes, Bitcoin is up, Ethereum is up, but it's not really the type of retail sentiment that we wanted to see. But we want to look at the top first, and that's why I've brought this chart up, which is the case that if we look at the current altcoin cycle, all of them are at an all-time low. So it's not anywhere close to a top, but it's claimed to be a top given the fact that Bitcoin has swept the all-time high and came all the way down since then. So we had a sweep of the all-time high earlier this month, and then Bitcoin crashed by 20% during the big crash on October the 10th. And that is where people start claiming that we are peaking with the entire market cycle. But all in all, if we look at the level of rates currently, Bitcoin is trending around 110K for nearly 6 months, while rates are at 4%. While if we look at 2021, Bitcoin was at 69K and peaked, while rates were at 0% and quantitative tightening was about to start. In the current case, we are seeing that quantitative tightening is going to be stopped. I think in the next few weeks, we're going to have new rate cuts. So the entire business cycle or monetary expansion is going to happen where most likely the markets are going to go from risk off, and in that sense gold, towards risk on, and in that sense Bitcoin. So you could argue that there is not really a top signal at this point, but in order to look at a potential top signal, we need to be looking at all those bull market peak signals that we have in our system. And because we have a very vibrant ecosystem, many people have been making indicators to predict a potential top or not. And that is what we can see on CoinGlass. You can see approximately 30 peak signals, and on top of it there is a green to red bar, which technically means if everything is into the red section, then you need to be getting out of your position, and if everything is in the green section, then that is actually a period to continue accumulating your positions. And as we look at the data, we can see that none of the bull market peak indicators have signaled a peak, 0. And that should mean that we're not even close to a potential top on the market, and that we are actually going to be getting into more momentum shortly. But the weird case is that Bitcoin is swimming around 110K, and that was primarily due to the inflow that we have with the ETF. So I think that the ones that are currently looking at a potential peak on the markets and on the top for the crypto markets are the ones that are doing it solely based on time. And I think basing it on time is a wrong way of looking at the markets, because I don't know anyone that is making profits by timing it based on time or selling their positions based on time. I think you should be doing it based on values of the actual asset, whether they are very much to the upside over skewed in terms of volatility or to the downside, instead of thinking it in terms of time. So if we look at that perspective, and the same with the Bitcoin dominance is still at a very high level. And in order to get a retail peak or a peak in general for the market, you want the Bitcoin dominance to drop fastly. And in this chart, we can see that it's actually the same as what we've witnessed in 2019 and 2020. And further in this video, I'll show you that the markets are actually looking like the same principle as in 2020, which is also the case why Julien Bittel is claiming a very bullish statement, which during the last week I listened to his keynote at Cebu Live. He gave a presentation for like 30 minutes talking about the markets and about the impact of the ISM, which is basically an indicator signaling the economic growth and strength that is correlated to the business cycle, and that's also correlated to Bitcoin. So if you look at this chart, basically what it says, and it's not the ones that he has been using in the keynote, but he's basically saying that once the business cycle and ISM goes up, Bitcoin is going to go up. And in the previous 3 to 4 years, it has been going flat. So there were other factors to say that Bitcoin has been going up. And as I said before, the ETF has signaled so much inflow in terms of liquidity, and that liquidity has pushed the entire Bitcoin price up towards a new level. But there was not a positive business cycle signaling that we're going to get to a top anywhere near. And that is what Julien also claims. He has a standard deviation outlook for the price of Bitcoin, that if the ISM is getting towards the 60 to 65 areas, that is where you should be getting out of your position for Bitcoin. And if that's going to be in 2026, then the upside could be anywhere close to 1.5 million, according to Julien Bittel, if we get towards the same standard deviation levels as we have witnessed in 2017 and 2021. So those are the factors right now. And if we look at the charts and if we look at the data, we can even see more arguments of why we are not peaking and why we're actually starting up the entire cycle. We recently hosted our very first crypto masterclass with OKX, and it was a huge success. We had over 100 people joining us in Amsterdam for me to talk 1 hour about crypto and trading, an AMA, and we had drinks and a chat at the end of the night. We had people driving in from Germany, and we had people flying in from the UK. And to be honest, this was something that I really wanted to do for years, and I think that we're going to be doing more of those events in the future. And if you want to be part of those events and want to know it the first, make sure to sign up through OKX in the link in the description beneath, and then you'll be the first to receive updates on all of the upcoming events. The markets have been super volatile in this month for altcoins. Most of the altcoins are down 20 to 40%. Bitcoin has seen a correction of nearly 20% in a single month and came back up again. But ultimately, we can look at the charts to see what is in there. Where are we? How far and how deep in the cycle are we? And to start off, I'm looking at my friend's chart, TechDev, with again the business cycle signal. I'm repeating it. Here we can see the business cycle, which is technically the blue line. and as you can see, it's correlated with the ISM. It is at the lowest point in the past 10 years. It's expanding, as you can see. The red dot is basically when ISM hits 65, and the green dot is technically a point where we usually find the bottom for Bitcoin, after which it consolidates and goes back up again. As you can see, every cycle that we witnessed, the bearish part becomes longer and longer and longer. And in this case, we are still bearish from 2022 onwards, which is 3.5 years. The previous one was 1.5 years. So there is a case to be made that the upcoming bull cycle for crypto is going to be substantially longer than the previous one, based on the fact that the negative business cycle has been significantly longer than the previous one. Again, if you want to look for a top indicator, we need to be looking at a case that we are at the peak of this entire indicator. We are at the peak of ISM, but that is nowhere close. We are actually at the bottom of this entire indicator, which means that we are still at the bottom of the altcoin interest, and that we are still going to see the escape velocity for Bitcoin to go up from here, which means that there is way more upside going to come. And to phrase Dan Held, Bitcoin isn't cheap or expensive, it's just the price for an asset. And if Bitcoin is going to go up from here in the coming 2 years to nearly $1 million, then it's actually cheap compared to that price. So it depends on your own reference why you would call something cheap or expensive. Ultimately, you're here to make a return. So if we look at the other charts, then orders versus Bitcoin, and then we add the MACD, which I normally don't do, and we can see that we're copy-pasting the previous cycle, in the sense that if we just witnessed the business cycle here, and we are at this low point in 2020, then this is comparable to each other. So this is like Q1 of 2020. If we look at Q1 of 2020, we can see that we are about to cross the MACD. We've had all these red bars after each other, indicating that we are in a bear market. And right now we've witnessed a massively long period of red bars, indicating that we are still in a bear market. We've had this big sweep, and now we are crossing the MACD, just the same as what we've seen in Q1 of 2020. And after that, we're about to start off the green bar period, in signaling that we're going to have a new run. Given the fact that we've had this big sort of period of bearishness, it is very likely to expect that the upcoming cycle will also be longer than the previous one. But ultimately, the indicators are signaling that we are copy-pasting the first quarter of 2020 and not anywhere close to the peak of 2021 or anywhere close to the peak of 2017 or Q1 of 2018. The same can be seen on Total 2, which is currently still fighting the resistance zone against the previous all-time high. And in order to have an actual bullish breakout or a bull market, it needs to break above this previous all-time high. We are building up stamina as we constantly are making higher lows and higher highs, which in the coming period we will be breaking the resistance, and then we will be going towards new all-time highs. The same can be seen on the Chinese renminbi versus the ETH Bitcoin chart. Both of these have been consolidating in the previous 2 months. ETH are a little bit more than the Chinese currency. That's normal. There's more risk involved by having ETH and therefore more volatility. But ultimately, the low has been made in April of 2025. And since then, it has been trending upwards. And it's looking to break to the upside again, which then would be in correlation with the FOMC, would be in correlation with a weaker dollar, would be in correlation with lower interest rates and quantitative easing, because the economy is getting weaker, inflation is not an active topic anymore, and the Fed needs to push the economy to be, constantly growing again to avoid a recession. And in that period, I assume that the Chinese renminbi goes up and therefore ETH versus Bitcoin as well. And the same can be said on all the altcoins that we have. That's the prime question here. Should we be selling the altcoin positions? Well, if we look at this chart, we have been going downwards since January of 2024, which is nearly 2 years on almost all of the altcoins. And recently, optimism has made a new all-time low against Bitcoin, which could be a period to actually sell your positions if you think the fundamental thesis is gone. But to be honest, I think that we are actually at an accumulation point. And given all the macroeconomic factors, I think the altcoins are still massively mispriced and that there is still a huge gap to the actual fair value. So there's no point for me to be selling those positions because I'm not basing my portfolio preferences and decisions on time. And I think that if people do that, then they will be sidelined massively when the markets are going to go up. So if we look at the charts, there is no top signal. It's only based from people that have a bias surrounding the top, creating indicators that fuel that bias. This cycle has proven to be completely different than the previous cycles. It remains to be the case. It has been shown to be the case, and it will continue to be the case. And I keep repeating it. It's the final easy cycle. If you remain patient, don't use leverage, and stay in your positions. And I think that that is the crucial factor. And that's why I remain fully allocated into my altcoin portfolio, because fundamentally nothing has changed. And I still expect to see a big return coming out of the coming period, coming out of the portfolio that I've established. And I'm not really worried about any of the portfolio allocations at this point. I'm just going to be patient and continue to build the companies. Make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'll see you again on a new update next week. Ciao.